Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Fall FedEx Sanderson Farms Initial Research Show. Enough of the wait. We are back from a 3-week hiatus. Hopefully you had a successful Fortinet and you had a successful Ryder Cup if you decided to make any wagers or play in any DFS contest. Myself, I did not know anything really about Marco Simone, so decided to take the week off last week for the Ryder Cup just to enjoy it as a fan. What do you think are the big takeaways from Rome? What do you think of Zach Johnson and his lineup pairings? Did you think the Americans had any chance throughout Sunday? All of that good stuff. And then, of course, if you've had success in the past 3 weeks, whether that be in golf or baseball or football, jump in chat or let me know via social media. Would love to be able to shout out members of the community who have success. But we are here for the Sanderson Farms. It's been 3 weeks, so let's get right into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter golf gambler and a much better golf DFS player. Go check out fantasynational.com. You will not regret it. In the description to the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, Instagram, Kick, all of that is in there. I will be posting some research tomorrow around former winners of the Sanderson Farms. So if you would like to see the weekly research that I do for the PGA Tour and on the PGA Tour, give me a follow at your preferred social media site, X or Instagram. Twitter or X is also where I place my betting cards every week for the PGA Tour. That'll be no different for the Sanderson Farms. That usually comes out Wednesday after the DFS Tactics show here on Calls. So if you want to see the weekly wagers that I make for the PGA Tour, give me a follow over at X as well. And then finally, for social media, Gabe's Twitter or X is in the description as well. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. It's a very good read. Gets you prepared for the week at hand. Lots of good information there. And if you are a subscriber to his article, you're going to be able to join us on Wednesday evenings after the DFS Tactics show over in his Substack chat where him and I continue the DFS talk. So the only way you're going to be able to join us is if you're a subscriber to that article. It is free, by the way. So go check out Gabe's article and follow him over at X and show him some support. And lastly, we're live. Chat is open. Again, want to hear from you all. How has your 3 weeks been? Did you have Sahith Theegala at the Fortinet? I ended up not wagering him. I really thought about it. I didn't like the 16 or 18 to 1 price that he was going at by the time I looked at DraftKings and that sports book. Did you have him a lot in your DFS lineups? How did that go? How did your Ryder Cup go? And anything else you want to talk about in chat? We are live and it is open. So let's do our initial research for the 2023 FedEx Fall Sanderson Farms. And we're going to start on a Sunday evening, as we always do, at the GCSAA Tournament Fact Sheet. This is a regular stop on the PGA Tour, usually the second event of a new season, but again with the limbo kind of season, or at least the limbo season, I'm calling it limbo, this weird time in the 2023 fall, just the second of, I believe, 7 fall events to finalize the 125 for the 2024 PGA Tour season. But Sanderson Farms has been a long-running tournament. It is being played at the Country Club of Jackson, which has hosted this event since 2014, I believe. And of course, we are in Jackson, Mississippi. The course is actually a composite. There are 27 holes at the Country Club of Jackson. You can, myself is in the way here, but the Country Club of Jackson features 27 holes. the Dogwood and Azalea 9 comprising the championship course. So it's a little bit of a composite, but no course changes that I am aware of, unlike what we had at the Fortinet with a little bit of a routing change there. No changes to the Country Club of Jackson. The Architect, we're not going to have anything to do with the Architect this week. This is a Mike Gogol design back in 2008. The Country Club of Jackson is a long par 72, measures to 7,461 yards. So we might be looking at some long courses and long course data this week. We'll take a look at that in the historic conditions a little bit later on in Fantasy National. The average green size slightly larger, than the average tour size green at 6,200 square feet here. Quite a bit of fairway, not a whole lot of rough. Pretty forgiving golf course, with the exception of that you have 5 holes with water in play. And we are on Bermuda greens, Champion Bermuda to be exact, with Zoysia in the rough. And Zoysia is a difficult, or different I should say, grass type, is commonly known as being sticky. If you are not familiar with it, it can be difficult to play out of. So we might want to look at some around the green type things with in regards to the rough. But there's a look at the Country Club of Jackson and the Sanderson Farms Championship from a GCSAA tournament fact sheet standpoint. Again, a fairly long par 72, over 7,400 yards, slightly larger than average greens. A little bit of water on the course, 5 holes with water in play. On the greens, we are on generally fast and lightning Bermuda, but Bermuda nonetheless with some Zoysia in the rough. Nothing to do with Course Architect. This is a Mike Gogol design. So we'll move to Fantasy National and take a look at the players in the field for the Sanderson Farms this week. I just checked Rob Bolton's Twitter feed to see if there have been any field changes, and there are 2 of them so far. You see Nikolai Højgaard coming off the European win at the Ryder Cup. He is not going to be making the trip back across the pond, as they say, to play this week. He was originally listed in the field. The other field change, Joseph Bramlett, has withdrawn as well, or taken his name out of the tournament. So those are the 2 field changes that I have seen so far. And do make a note of that as you continue your research late into this evening and into tomorrow when the odds come out that Højgaard and Joseph Bramlett are not in the field this week. The only other Ryder Cup player in the field as of right now is Ludwig Ober. And there's a lot of talk during the Ryder Cup on how you pronounce his name, so I'm going to try and mention or say that correctly. I'm going to butcher it 10 ways from Sunday. But the only other Ryder Cupper, Ludwig Ober, but a decent field, I suppose. You see, I've got this sorted on the last 36 rounds, so long as the rounds have been in 2023. Our top performers in the past 36 rounds, Doug Gim, Eric Cole, more than likely your PGA Tour Rookie of the Year this season. The aforementioned Ludwig Ober, Stefan Jaeger, Peter Quest, Emiliano Grillo, Dylan Wu, Kevin Stroman, Lee Hodges, and Nate Lashley. Some other semi-notable names, I suppose. Christian Bezuidenhout has been in the top 50 in the OWGR in the recent past. Alex Noren, Garrick Higo, a winner on the PGA Tour. Nick Hardy, Sam Bennett made his made his grand introduction at the Masters this past season. Adams Vinson. So a few bigger names here, but really thanks to the schedule and this limbo that the PGA Tour fall portion falls into, plus the week after the Ryder Cup, one of the weaker fields generally speaking, and we'll look at some of that info more than likely tomorrow night as well. But there's a look at our top performers in the past 36 rounds in the field this week. Let's go ahead and move to the course breakdown in Fantasy National. First thing I like to do is look at where the 9th and 10th most difficult holes are on a course. If those play to par, you're generally looking at a average difficulty course. Well, the 10th most difficult hole plays to 600ths. The 9th plays to 600ths. The 8th is 100th over par. So you would be looking at an average difficulty course just in terms of raw numbers there. But this, like the Fortinet, is going to skew to the easy side. With this being a par 72, 4 par 5s for professionals to take advantage of. There are quite a few birdies here. Not a whole lot of eagles, however. You see the par 5 third, only 1.5. The par 5 11th, 2.5. That's a pretty good eagle chance, but nothing spectacular. In terms of on the PGA Tour, you got 0.5% on the par 5 5th, 1% on the par 5 14th. So there are eagles, but at least from an initial look, nothing that would signify that we would want to look at eagles by themselves. Just good birdie opportunities. And again, I will focus your attention on some of these average scores to par. You got a little better than 1/3 of a shot under par. The easiest hole, par 5 third, 1700ths, 3/10ths, 1/4 of a shot, a little bit better than 1/4 of a shot. So lots of good birdie opportunities here. Whereas the most difficult hole here at the Country Club of Jackson, very difficult, the par 4 16th, 2/10ths of a shot under or over par, but then you're very quickly getting into scores that are essentially par, 1/10th over par, 900ths, 600ths, 900ths. So you can see the birdies are outweighing the bogeys here at the CC of Jackson. The length of the course is coming in quite a bit in the par 5s, and that's helping to contribute the lack of eagles. You'll see the par 5 5th, 612, 591, 584, some very long par 5s here at the CC of Jackson, which is contributing to the length of the course. There is one drivable par 4 15th, actually does yield an eagle close to 1%, so some of the bigger hitters might be able to get an eagle once or twice throughout the week. But a lot of the length coming in these par 5s. So a lot of birdies here, generally easier. Not sure if we're going to be looking at easy to par filter. We'll take a look at the historic conditions after a little while and see. But there's a look at the CC of Jackson in terms of a scorecard view. We move to a graphical representation of the CC of Jackson. Strokes gained by round there for your top 10s. A lot of putting here, a little bit of iron play, but the off the tee is almost doubling the strokes gained around the green, which is contributing to the Country Club of Jackson being slightly favoring ball striking. We move to the top 5s, much the same, mainly putting, iron play, but off the tee heavily outweighing the around the green. And for the winners, around the green is very, very minimal. In fact, off the tee is almost 3 times the emphasis of around the green. So even though putting is by far and away the most important shot type graphically here at the Country Club of Jackson, we're still going to be looking at a lot of ball striking thanks to the off the tee that we see playing quite a bit of an importance here for the Sanderson Farms. We'll move to average strokes gained by hole by par. Par 5s, again, generally what the professionals take advantage of for your top 10s. Par 5s outweighing the 4s and 3s pretty significantly. Little bit of a change here in terms of top 5s in the sense that the par 3s fall off. And that's going to be a little bit of a an outlier or distracting, however you want to think about it, as we'll see that the par 3s actually have a decent influence for the winners. But the par 5s still making up the majority of your strokes gained by hole by par, than the 4s and the 3s for your top 5s. And then the winners have been playing the par 3s really, really darn well, along with the par 5s. So for the top 5s, they just haven't been taking advantage of the par 3s or scoring well on the par 3s, whereas if you're winning, you are. So we'll see how much, if any, we want to put some emphasis on par 3s this week. And when we go to Microsoft Excel, we'll take a look at that. But there's a look at your average strokes gained by hole by par for your top 10s, your top 5s, and your winners. Moving to hole composition, the 4 par 3s here, you've got a short par 3, 150 to 175, one fairly long at 175 to 200. You do have 2 200 plus par 3s, one that measures at 214 and one that measures at 223. The 175 to 200 is on the lower end of that, 181, and then the short par 3, 168. So really, you can envision, a day or two perhaps that 2 par 3s fall into the 175 to 200. Perhaps we have a 225 plus par 3 on a day if that hole gets lengthened. But 2 of the 4 par 3s fall 200 to 225. Again, the aforementioned 0 to 350 to drivable par 4. The par 4 15th measures at 330. Nothing between 350 and 4. Instead, 60% of our par 4s here at the Country Club Jackson measure 400 450. So we'll see, again, in Microsoft Excel tonight and into tomorrow for the Data Dive show whether we want to focus on this range of par 4s. 2 from 450 to 5, and then 1 extremely long par 4 at 500 plus. 3 of the 4 par 5s measure 550 to 600. 2 of these 3 measure 580 plus. So again, that's where the length of this course comes in. Lots of long par 3s. And then we have the 1 par 5 measuring at 612. Approach shot distribution. Most of your approach shots coming from 100 to 125. A little bit of 125 to 150. Of course, 200 plus with the 4 par 5s. Again, birdie opportunities, so some players are going to be able to attack these greens in 2 or these par 5s in 2. But even if they're not, we've got shorter clubs majority of the time into these greens here at the Country Club of Jackson, and you can see that with the 400 to 450, the impressive amount, 60% of our par 4s, 400 to 450, which is contributing to the majority of approach shots falling from 100 to 150. Historic cut line here at the Sanderson Farms, it has been as high as even par. It's been as low as -4. That was 2 years ago. Generally hovers in this -1, -2 range. -2 is kind of right at the border of easy and average. So absolutely looking at something on the easier end of the spectrum, but a little hesitant to go out and say that it is all easy or purely easy, as we've only had 1 year that was -4 in terms of a cut. Mentioned this when we were going through the scorecard. The birdies far outweigh the bogeys here. 20% birdies, only 13 and some change percent in terms of bogeys. The Eagles not really all that representative here. You do have a couple of chances on those par 5s, and perhaps for the big hitters, the drivable par 4 here, but not a whole lot of Eagles. Just a very, very good birdie course, birdie opportunity course, the Country Club of Jackson. Driving accuracy, much less than the tour average here. This rough is not very difficult to play out of. Players are not afraid to be in the rough. It's not very long, so they're not concerned with having to hit fairways. Greens and regulation percentage, again, contributing to the ease of the Country Club of Jackson. Green and regulation percentage almost 70% here. That is one of the higher numbers that I have seen. And again, these greens are slightly larger than tour average as well. So a lot of combinations here contributing to this high green in regulation percentage. Again, expressing the relative ease of the Sanderson Farms. Players are much more successful scrambling here than the average tour event. 61 and some change percent versus 57.5% at the average tour event. 3 putts per round are right at tour average, maybe slightly less. Again, these greens are slightly larger, but these greens can get lightning. They can get lightning fast. And generally coming from the Fortinet, which was a combination of bent and Poa annua, now coming into these lightning speed Bermuda greens, some players might be a little rusty or not familiar with Bermuda all that well. So that's contributing to the 3 putts per round. Might be something we want to look at. Again, speaking to players not afraid to be in the rough, driving distance here a little bit higher than the average tour event. And then green in regulation proximity, you would expect with larger greens to be a little bit further away, 30.5 versus 29. So there's a look at the Country Club of Jackson in terms of a scorecard and graphical view here at Fantasy National. Before we go back to the player page view and take a look at a few things, let's go ahead and jump to the historic conditions. And yes, you'll see quite a few rounds that are easy, including the 2022, which every single round was easy. This was the year that the cut line reached -4. But last year, 2 rounds of average, 2 rounds of easy. 2021, 2 rounds of average, 2 rounds of easy. So we're definitely looking at something that is on the border of easy and average. But again, I am a little hesitant to go out and use the easy to par filter with a lot of confidence, at least early on in the research this evening. What you won't see, much like the Fortinet, what you won't see are rounds that are difficult. You might have a round here and there that plays difficult, but in fact, that's the only one from 2018. So mostly easy and average rounds. Of course, we are on Bermuda, and we have been ever since we came to the Country Club of Jackson. Hitting fairways, I don't really pay attention to that here, especially since the rough is really only average length. Players just aren't concerned with being in the rough. You can see even one year they had it short. But the notable thing here, 2 notable things I should say, green speeds, the past 3 years, every single round has been lightning. So we're definitely going to be looking at fast and lightning Bermuda greens, not just fast greens, but fast and lightning, and that's contributing to the amount of 3 putts here at the Country Club of Jackson. And we saw in the GCSA tournament fact sheet that even though on the official scorecard measures 7,400 plus, I think it was 7,461, you see, much like the Fortinet, when the Fortinet was listed at 7,100, the Fantasy National has the course in between 72 and 7,400. So not a lot of confidence inspired there to use long course filters. And of course, we will check wind tomorrow and especially Wednesday. 2019, the course was set up extremely long, which perhaps contributes to a little bit of some more difficulty, but for the most part it has been set up in between 72 and 7,400 yards, so I'm not terribly confident using the long course filter either. So with that, let's go ahead and move to the player page view for this week's Sanderson Farms. And yes, I will use the easy scoring relative to par just to give us an idea of some of the players we might want to focus this week, or at least early on. But I'm not confident that I'm going to stick to this filter because of what we saw in the historic conditions. There are several rounds that can play to average. Let's see. 29 rounds. Most players have into the teens. I think that'll be enough just to give us an idea of players we might want to look at if the course does play easy this week. So, your top performers this calendar year, since the beginning of January 1st, in rounds that are easy, your top performers have been Doug Gim, Eric Cole, Dylan Wu, Peter Quest, Stefan Jaeger, Alex Smalley, Alex Noren, Ludwig Ober, Bo Hostler, and Akshay Bhatia. Again, skipping Nikolai Højgaard, he has withdrawn from the tournament. Again, we talked about how the official scorecard is set up over 7,400 yards, but not going to be terribly confident in that because of what we saw in the historic conditions. But if we want to take a look at long courses, I'll have to expand the timeline here. Not enough of a sample size for most of these players. In fact, if we go all the way back to the beginning of 2022, the highest amount of rounds is only 28. Most players have into the teens, maybe low 20s. So your top performers in the field this week on long courses since the beginning of 2022, Sam Stevens, Nate Lashley, Akshay Bhatia, Kevin Chappell, Harry Hall, Wesley Bryan, Jimmy Walker, Ben Martin, Augusto Nunez, and Aaron Baddeley. So a little bit of overlap here. I know Bhatia was up there in terms of top 10 on easy courses. He's also up here in terms of long courses. So perhaps a name to consider early on in your research or in wagers when the odds come out tomorrow. No other name stands out as overlapping both easy and long. Højgaard would have, but again, he is withdrawn. Let's bring this timeline in here. I think, we'll take a look at a couple of other metrics here. Let's remove the long course filter. We definitely want to look at some off the tee and approach. We saw how important off the tee and approach and just ball striking in general have been historically here at the Sanderson Farms. So our top off the tee players, the last 36 rounds in the field this week: Brent Grant, Garrick Higo, Ludwig Ober, Doug Gim, Kevin Yu, MJ Duffy, Hayden Buckley, S.H. Kim, Ryan Palmer, and Sam Bennett. Of course, we don't want to overlook the irons, the approach players either. So our top 10 approach players in the last 36 rounds: Alex Smalley, Kevin Roy, Mark Hubbard, Ches Reavie, Sam Ryder, Eric Cole, Doug Gim, Nate Lashley, Ted Potter Jr., and Kevin Streelman. So of the top 10 for ball striking, only one player is top 10 in both off the tee and approach. It's Doug Gim. We'll see or you can see where his weakness lies. But he's also been good around the green. However, around the green doesn't have a big factor here. So there's your top ball strikers split off the tee and approach. Let's go ahead and take a look at some putting. Definitely want to do that. We are on Bermuda greens, as you can see there, and I am going to use the fast and lightning filters since every single round the past 3 years at the Sanderson Farms has been lightning. If we sort on a number of rounds, Jaeger has 34. Most players have into the teens. Should be enough. So our top putters in the field this week on fast and lightning Bermuda greens have been Chad Ramey, Alex Noren, Chesson Hadley, Ben Taylor, Cameron Percy, Ben Griffin, Dylan Wu, Ryan Brim, Dylan Fratelli, and Carson Young. Only other thing we can look at, let's just take a look at par 5 efficiency. Again, par 5s are going to be a pretty important facet this week. There are 4 of them. They have been the most strokes gained for everyone in the top 10, top 5 winners. So our top par 5 performers in the field this week in the past 36 rounds: Stefan Jaeger, Davis Thompson, Ryan Gerard, Ludwig Ober, Akshay Bhatia, Scott Harrington, S.H. Kim, Lee Hodges, Garrick Higo, and Adam Long. All right, with that, we're going to move to Microsoft Excel. I would normally go to the tournament history, but again, just like the week of the Fortinet, Fantasy National is not populating that page view so far this week. But not to worry, I have the early look file ready to go for this evening. So we will move to Microsoft Excel. And the first thing we're going to take a look at, let's take a look at the Sanderson Farms and the Country Club of Jackson in relation against other courses. And one of the first thing that stands out to me, even though the off the tee and the approach were very important graphically, they are actually slightly under full field or consistent full field course averages on the PGA Tour, 3% and 2% under. Around the green is exactly as important as the average full field course, which explains that or tells us that around the green is not really going to be too much. We really only want to focus on around the green on courses that are going to really, really highlight it. Say the Fortinet, the Houston, or at Memorial Park at the Houston, it's a very difficult tournament. Phoenix emphasizes around the green. The Genesis Riviera emphasizes around the green. So not going to do anything with around the green this week. And you see, and we saw it especially graphically, just the sheer importance of putting here at the Sanderson Farms, almost 25% more important than the average consistent full field course on the PGA Tour. So lots of putting. We are not going to be ignoring the ball striking at all. We saw how important those were graphically over in Fantasy National. Moving to the driving and greens page view, you see distance 53%, and you take and think about your former winners here. Mackenzie Hughes, a little bit more around the green related, but even he is positive in terms of distance here at the Sanderson Farms at the Country Club of Jackson. Some other former winners, Sam Burns can really move it off the tee. Cameron Champ, Ryan Palmer, especially when Ryan Palmer won back in 2016, 2017, was much longer than what he is now. He could move it off the tee. A lot of your champions here have had quite a bit of distance. And you see, just fairways don't really matter. We're going to be looking for distance players this week at the Sanderson Farms. Those are generally who have performed the best. Good drives gained, a little bit of a number here, 17%. So if you find players that are both long and accurate, they're obviously going to have a bigger advantage. But the more important part of that combination is the length this week. And you see the greens, they're so easy to hit here. There's not a whole lot to be gained with greens, just 2% more important than the average full field course. These greens are just generally pretty easy to hit. So if most of the players are hitting these greens in regulation, you can imagine that's why putting is such a big factor here. Looking at scoring, again, the emphasis, not a whole lot of eagles here. Not a whole lot of eagles, just a lot of birdies. So we're going to be looking at birdies or better. Eagles do happen, so it's not that we're going to ignore eagles, but we're going to be looking at birdies or better and not eagles in of themselves, even though this is a par 72. Bogey avoidance, a little bit higher than the average full field course, but you can see the emphasis is in birdies. Looking at par 3s, 4s, and 5s, again, a little bit of a outlier when we looked at the top 5s, because the top 10s and your winners, especially your winners, have been playing these par 3s pretty darn well. 22% more important than the average full field course. In fact, it is the same distance away from average or neutral as the Shriners next week. So 22% more important here at the Country Club of Jackson. If there's a range, it does look like it is the 200 to 225, since 2 of our 4 par 3s fall into this range. But when we go in into the data dive tomorrow and we look at the detail, we'll have to see if par 3s 200 to 225 really do make up the majority of our par 3 strokes gained, or if this is just a facet of some courses maybe not having 175 to 200, 200 to 225, etc. But emphasis on par 3s, absolutely. Par 4s, they did look like they got mitigated a little bit, but they're still 14% more important than the average full field course. The one drivable par 4 is contributing quite a bit. I don't want to put a lot of emphasis in that, if any at all, because you can see some courses just don't have drivable par 4s. The Arnold Palmer doesn't. Puerto Rico, Cocoa Beach doesn't. Innisbrook, Corrales doesn't. So not every course has a 0 to 350. But 6 of our 10 par 4s do fall in the 400 to 450. And you can see that range is indeed higher than the average full field course. So we'll have to take a look and see if there's a range of par 4s that we want to focus on. More than likely it would be this one, since 60% of them fall into this range. And looking at par 5s, just like the Fortinet from 3 weeks ago where we only focused on one range, looking like we're going to do the same this week. Because even though the par 5s are 40% more important, look where all of that percentage looks like it's coming in. The 550 to 6, which has 3 of the 4 par 5 lengths here at the Country Club of Jackson. 3 of your 4 par 5s measure to this range here. So there's a look at Country Club of Jackson against other consistent full field courses on the PGA Tour. Last thing we can take a look at, let's take a look at some proximities. 1% in terms of total, more important, not sure. Definitely don't think that's enough to go on to isolate proximity. Looks like even though the majority of approach shots come from this range, or from these 2 ranges, look, they're pretty significantly negative. So when we go to the early look file and see who has played well historically here, we'll see if this is some data not matching up, or it's not an important factor. Of the ranges, it looks like the 75 to 100 and the 200 plus, which I can understand the 200 plus, since you have 4 par 5s, they're all pretty much gettable. I can understand why the 200 plus would contribute a pretty high or pretty significant portion of success here. But when we go through the early look file and some players who have played well here, some former champions, we'll see how much 200 plus plays. So there's a look at the Country Club of Jackson against other full field courses on the PGA Tour. With that, we're going to go to the aforementioned early look file. As a reminder for anyone who is a returning viewer, or for your information if you are a new viewer, these are statistics gathered solely at the Country Club of Jackson in the past 5 years. So your player, the number of times they've played at the Country Club of Jackson for the Sanderson Farms, their average finish, how many times they've missed the cut, and then their average performance in whatever statistic. So, Garrick Higo has only played 1 time, so he gained 3.2 off the tee in his 1 year, 4.7 approach, etc. Whereas somebody like Emiliano Grillo, who has played 4 times, he's averaged 2.1 off the tee in those 4 years. He's averaged 3.9 approach in those 4 years, etc., etc. Okay, with that, I'm going to remove anybody who has only played it once or twice in the past 5 years. I want to see, of the players who have consistently played the Country Club of Jackson, what they have played, what they have done well here at the course. And much like the Fortinet from 3 weeks ago, your highest or top performer has an average finish of 23rd, which would signify that this can be a little bit volatile. Not very consistent in terms of players and how they perform at the Country Club of Jackson. And some of the research that I'm going to post to social media tomorrow is going to highlight the lack of correlation between prior success and, indicating future success at the Country Club of Jackson. So Charlie Hoffman, he's been just solid, but again, focus on putting. Hayden Buckley, off the tee and putting. Griot has never been very much a good putter, getting a little bit better, but you can see he's been ball striking it very well around the Country Club of Jackson. CT Pan, average finish of 30th, irons and putting. Kevin Streelman, off the tee and putting. William McGirt, doing a little bit around the green, but still putting and irons. So if we take a look at the players who have averaged, I usually don't like going all the way down to the top 50s, but top 40 is only 5 players. So for anybody who has played at least 3 of the past 5 Sanderson Farms, there's 15 players. And you can see those 15 right here. Anybody who has averaged to top 50, you're off the tee, that's a 0.6. Approach is a 1.6, so heavy emphasis there. The around the green looks like it is hardly anything at all, a 0.4. And then your putting, while you do have a couple of poor performances, this is a 1.3, getting really hurt by DJ Trahan. But you have a 4.2 in Nate Lashley. Peter Malnati, a 3.1. 2.5 here from Nick Watney. 3.7 Hoffman. 2, 2.2, 2. Lots of solid putting numbers here for your players who have consistently performed at an elite level at the Country Club at Jackson. All right, moving across into driving and greens and fairways. William McGirt, not much in terms of distance. Charlie Hoffman can still move it a little bit. Stallings is long. Griot, not necessarily the longest, but even he is high, positive in terms of distance. We'll take a look at some former champions here. Ryan Palmer, let's see if we can find him. Cameron Champ, they might. So that's another thing that I will highlight for everyone on social media. There's not a lot of correlation because a lot of players don't come back and play the Sanderson Farms year over year. So this isn't a normal stop for a lot of the PGA Tour players. This is generally a Korn Ferry Tour graduate event. Not a whole lot of distance here from your players who have averaged a top 50, which is surprising considering what Microsoft Excel showed and how distance is just seemingly a pretty big factor. Having said that, if everybody's hitting driver, you're not going to gain a whole lot in terms of distance generally either. Fairways at 0.8, not a whole lot there. Do appear to be a little bit in terms of greens. Only one player negative in terms of greens. Not sure how much I want to put emphasis on that, again, because these greens are easy to hit. Moving into the scoring, again, so here's a very, very good correlation here, or what's backing up what we saw data-wise with Microsoft Excel in the course comparison of the players who have played multiple times, at least 3 of the past 5 years. Anyone who has averaged a top 50 finish is positive in birdies gained. You just got to get some birdies here. Bogeys will happen. Eagles don't necessarily, you don't need them. They obviously help. Scott Stallings has quite a few. Noah Orlander, but you don't need them. Kevin Streelman, negative. Charlie Hoffman, negative. But every single player who has played in at least half of the previous 5 Sanderson Farms has been positive in birdies gained. So that is one aspect that you're going to want to focus on early on this week in your research, is your guys that can go and get birdies. Bogeys are going to happen, but as long as they can get birdies in bunches, that's who you're going to want to focus. Moving to par 3s, 4s, and 5s. Par 3s are going to get hurt a little bit towards the bottom of the players who average a top 50. But look at anybody who has averaged a top 45 or 43 or so. All of these players are positive in terms of par 3s. Again, this number is going to get worse thanks to some poor performances down at the lower end. This is still a 0.7. Par 4s, just off your screen, is a 1.7. Oh, excuse me, that's par 5s. So par 5s are 1.7, par 3s are a 0.7, par 4s are 1.7. So a lot of emphasis on these par 5s here. Lots of emphasis on these par 5s. So there's your par 3s. Doesn't look like any range in particular. Jumping off the page is the most important. Here are your par 4s. They're extremely important, but these are pretty low numbers compared to other courses. Yes, no one is negative in terms of par 4s, but these are still fairly low numbers. 3.3, 3.6 as your highest, when a lot of times you'll have 5s and 6s for your par 4s. So a little bit mitigated in importance, I think. And if there is a range, surprisingly, it looks like it's the 450 to 5, at least for the players who have played the best historically here at the Sanderson Farms. Is a 1.1. That's a 0.2. Yeah. So that's interesting to see. But the big emphasis is going to be on the par 5s. It's very, very rare that the par 4s aren't significantly ahead of the par 5s and the par 3s. The par 5s equal the par 4s. And look at this. Just like the par 4s, no one is negative in terms of par 5 performance if they have been an elite player at specifically the Country Club of Jackson the past 5 years. 3.3, 3.5, 2s, 2.9. Lots and lots and lots of par 5 performance. Looks like it's majority coming in the 550 to 600. This is a 1.0. This is a 0.2. 0.5. So it would be the 550 to 600 would be the range. But lots and lots and lots of importance in these par 5s. Lastly, we'll take a look at proximity. Again, these are your most common ranges of approach shots. But for the players who have performed the best, doesn't look like there's a whole lot here. This is a 3.6. That's pretty low. This number's a 5.3. That's pretty low. I don't know, decent performance here in terms of total procs, but no heavy green. Looks like the 175 and 200 plus would be the ranges, but I don't think there's a lot of approach shots that come from 175 to 200. 200 plus I could understand, but you got a few players that are negative in here as well. So, be interesting when we go through the data in the data dive tomorrow, data dive show tomorrow, what exactly we're going to be looking for in proximity, in terms of proximity, if anything at all. But again, just going to highlight 2 takeaways for you all this evening as you prepare some of your wagers and start thinking about your DFS lineups when the prices come out tomorrow. Lots of emphasis in terms of par fives. So target your par five performers and target your players that can go and get birdies. Your birdie percentage players, your highest birdie percentage players. Bogeys be damned. You got to go and get birdies. Because bogeys will happen at this course. A few. But you don't necessarily need eagles. It's just lots and lots of birdies. All right, I will bring back everybody in the field. And there is a look at the players in the field for the Sanderson Farms this week and how they have historically performed at the Country Club of Jackson. That's going to do it for the initial research show this evening. I want to thank everybody who tuned in, watched, listened, and who supports the channel by liking the video, commenting, subscribing. I always appreciate it. The PGA Tour is going to be a little bit more consistent now, moving to towards the end of this fall limbo season. So we'll have quite a few weeks here in a row where calls will be live every Sunday, Monday, and Wednesday, doing our research, our data, our DFS Tactics shows. But thanks again for all of the support. Let me know how you did for the Fortinet and the Ryder Cup. Reach out to me on social media or in the comments. And then lastly, be on the lookout for the research that I'm going to post to social media tomorrow regarding some previous champions of the Sanderson Farms. And I'll give you a quick look at that winner matrix that's going to produce a little bit of that research. So be on the lookout for that. For all of the wagers that you made for the Fortinet and the Ryder Cup, for all of the DFS contests you played for the Fortinet and the Ryder Cup, and until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.